Hello, we are live. Welcome back. This is the track 3 of the Plone Conference 2020. Now with us, we have Fulvio Casali. He's doing archaeology of Plone. And this is the results he gathered so far. With you, Fulvio.
Thank you, Erico. Okay, I want to start with a poll. Who is the handsome young man on the left? Do you recognize him? Obviously on the right, we see Steve McMahon, but this handsome young fella on the left, can you tell me who that is? And I have a hint for you on the next slide. And I'm gonna try and go to loud swarm so I can see the answers to my poll. In Slido. Okay, let's see. Can somebody type an answer, please? I don't see any answers.
It is there, and they got it right.
Ah, okay, so yeah, there's a delay, right. Okay, very good. All right. Okay, kids, gather around. I have a story to tell you. My name is Fulvio Casali. I am full on GitHub, and I'm not really on social media since, for a few years, and I have survived, which really makes me a bad candidate for being on the marketing team, honestly, because nowadays it's all about dopamine. But the relevant parts of the parts of my biography that are relevant for this talk are that I started using and developing for Plone at Web Collective in Seattle in 2008 until Web Collective closed. And then I went solo as a Plone consultant basically since 2012. And also I was, originally I was a physicist in my early days, which is why I treated this this whole project as an experiment, as you will see. But for today, I want to be your historian. And this is the experiment. So I've been somewhat active in the marketing team this year, and as is probably obvious to everyone, Ploneorg is something that falls under the jurisdiction of the marketing team, and it needs attention for sure, which will probably result in a relaunch next year sometime. But there is a lot of content. In fact, as we started this project, I was shocked at how much content I did not know there is on there. Like, for example, you can go back and find almost anything you wanna know about old conferences. It is inconsistent. Some years there's more, some years there's less, but the amount of information that is on there is amazing. But for the purposes of an achievable task that we wanted to take on, we decided to just start cleaning up our news items. Just keep it smart, measurable, achievable, and so on, and just focus on tagging. Start with tagging. Go through the content and tag it. That way, we will know more about what there is and what else needs to be done as a second project. So so first we decided on a controlled vocabulary of tags that we wanted to apply, so that we wouldn't just all start making up random tags that quickly become unmanageable and inconsistent. And then we just split up the workload, so everybody got 3 or 4 years to work through. So you would go through and look at each news item one at a time and tag it according to this controlled vocabulary that we decided on. And I want to say before I even move on, if anybody, as a result maybe of this talk or anything, or just just in the past noticed this, the news items that we have, especially the old ones, do not look pretty. And part of it is the result of the fact that Plone.org was upgraded many, many times over the years. And so unfortunately, some of the formatting got lost. And we never went back and cleaned it up after the fact. And so, it's how it is. But it also reflects the kind of a little bit of the dichotomy between what there is on a website and how you want to manage it. If you want to basically put your best face forward, versus on the other hand, if you want to just treat it as a record of everything you have done. And I for one, I am eternally grateful to all of the teams that came before us who did migrate and did keep the content that we do have, because I think for a community website, it is very important that we keep records, even if it doesn't present Plone as a fancy company with just looking very, very professional. I think keeping the information is the most important thing. All right, so we strapped on our hard hats, and I think this is Riku-Pekka. We descended down deep into the pits of Plone.org and the news items, started digging until we found a treasure. And this is a representation of the treasure that we have. And it's a classic example of a pretty picture that looks scientific, but really doesn't mean anything. Because, okay, yes, I mean, you can see how many news items were published each year, and there are trends, but the trends really don't matter. The overall number is what matters. We have 855 news items. And the part of the reason why this doesn't represent anything is because editorial standards changed over the years. For example, in early Plone.org versions, self-registration was open, and lots of different people posted news items on the wildest topics. Obviously, there must have been spam as well that got cleaned out. So there isn't any spam, but some of the content is weird. Also, in some years, we had news digests. In 2009 and 2010, Mark Coram did news digests. In 14 and 15, Christina McNeil. Special shout out to Christina McNeil. She did an incredible job with those news items, with those news digests. The information that she collected was beautiful, and you can really go back and look at that. Also, in 2014, we started our discourse instance on community.plone.org. So maybe at some point after 2014, a lot of announcements were not put on Plone.org anymore. Like I said, standards changed over the years and over the rotation of the people in charge of just this aspect of Ploneorg. Also, some years the conference was promoted very aggressively, like in the months and weeks before. There were news items almost every other day. And they were very repetitive. Like, there was really almost no new information. It was just an attempt to drum up the enthusiasm and the excitement and get people to register. But anyway, so we have lots of data, lots of information, and it will be interesting to keep actually digging through it, and I'd be interested to work on this. And this picture is for a couple of disclaimers. The maps of our continents are dependent on the levels of the sea, the level of the sea. If for any reason the ocean levels were 2,000, 3,000 meters higher than they are now, well, way beyond any projections that we can have for climate change, just hypothetically, basically all you would have left on a map of the world are just the mountain ranges. And think of the level of the sea as a metaphor for our level of attention. We can choose where we want to put our attention. And in this metaphor, the news items are the peaks, because there are only like a few dozen news items in a year. But if you wanted to lower your level of attention, say, for example, to the posts in discussion forums, or to posts on social media, or to commits or issues, the activity in GitHub, for example, we would have a lot more data and a much more complex picture of the map of our, the lay of the land, so to speak. But still, it's still worthwhile to look at the mountain peaks as, just knowing where they are, what orientation they are laid out in, and so on. So news items do not represent our whole history, of course, but still they're interesting. They do tell us a story. This is my personal view of the stages of development of Plone that I base on this experiment, on the data that I found. I would like to call the early days the years between 2001 and 2005, the middle days the years between 2006 and 2014, and the latter days and the rebirth the years between 2015 and the present. So the early days obviously were strongly influenced by our founders, Alan Runyon and Alex Leamy. From what I learned from the news items is that the first known screenshot of an early work in progress Plone was August 12th of 2001, and it will be fun to find it. We don't actually have it. Plone 1.0 was released in early 2003. The final release candidates were in December of 2002. The first Plone conference was in 2003 in New Orleans. And the amazing thing for me, because I've kind of had this idea that, the Plone community and the whole Ploniverse sort of would have grown linearly, but that's not the case at all. It really exploded in the early days. If you think about the fact that the first Plone conference had 150 people. I mean, if it, like this year, you know, this week, we have a very large number, but that's partly because, you know, we are online, so it is much easier for people to come. And I think 150 would have been, we would have considered it a success this year if we had had the conference, you know, in MeetSpace. Down below, you see some milestones. The first 1,000 CVS commit was on May 24th. Downloads, well, that's a pretty, you know, that's a pretty arbitrary measure, but still, I mean, the number of active developers that I found from early news items was like in the hundreds already in these early years. Like, I don't remember now, I don't have it actually, my notes are a little bit scattered, but trust me, we had a lot of activity in terms of also just news exposure, conference exposure, you know, articles that were printed, interviews. They were really heady days. The middle days, what here I call the climax, is where basically Plone consolidated. So we had worldwide adoption that kept growing pretty fast or steadily, even though the first 4 years were an explosion of worldwide adoption already. We had a lot of policy activity at the level of the Plone Foundation. In the middle days were the days where all of the books were published. We got a lot of awards. Google Summer of Code dates back to 2006. User groups shot up in the early days, but also kept growing in the middle days. And that's also when multi-stakeholder initiatives, Plone.gov, in collaboration with organizations representing municipal bodies, like, you know, city governments or regional governments, Plone.gov and Plone.gov and Plone.edu. Those all happened in this period. And the books. Who remembers these books? In fact, I have another poll. Let's see if I can activate this poll. No. Yes. Okay. Please select your favorite Plone book from the list. My personal favorite, one of my favorites was the Web Component Development by, oh gosh, what was his name? Gosh, now I forget. One of the complex names. Yeah, Aspelli's book was one of the most influential, probably for a lot of people, myself included. But also, let me go back. 2011 was actually the last year a Plone book was published. The first one in the 2011 column actually was published in 2010, but it would have messed up my layout, so I put it there. Close enough. So we had we got a lot of awards. And as you can see, we got a lot of awards even in the early days in 2004 and 2005, but most of them we got in these middle years. And some of them were awarded to Plone, but some also to initiatives like PloneGov, PloneEDU, and some to specific Plone companies for the merits of specific websites launched by them. But we still, we still like to take credit for them as a community. We had lots of articles in the news. This is all very incomplete because, again, our news items are pretty inconsistent in this way. So it's not easy to actually extract this information. But these, there are several that we know of for sure, and others we can only speculate. So we've been to a lot of conferences, even in 2002, before the first Plone version of Plone 1 was released. In terms of policy work, the Plone Foundation was established in 2004. The Plone trademark was finally finalized in 2007 and handed over to the Plone Foundation. We had a Plone diversity statement since 2010, and an anti-harassment policy adopted by the first Plone conference in 2011. And the work of the Plone Foundation has been ongoing. There would be more policy achievements since then. Obviously, we know how strong Plone's adoption was and still is at the government level. And also, there were a lot of user groups that got established in many, many countries around the world. And here's another pop quiz. Here's the invite for the first San Francisco Bay Area meetup in November of 2005. And the question is, who wrote this announcement? This cracks me up. This is pretty typical, I think, for one of these characters. And I think I know the answer, but I'm not actually 100% sure. I wish the answer were Spanky. Initially I thought it was Spanky, but I think really it is Rob Miller. At least that's the alias. I had to actually Google and found that the alias that the user that logged in and posted this news item is still in use by a Rob Miller on GitHub. So I'm pretty, it's probably him. But it could have been written by Spanky for all we know. And here is another precious, precious gem. In 2005, there was a sprint in San Jose, and at the end, they gave out awards. And sorry if the font is small, if you can't read it, but I'll read a couple of these that just crack me up. Most irresponsible use of CBS Head Award, second best looking team coach award, most efficient at converting test errors into failures award, honorary title of Plone Pimp award, least likely to be caught without a sound system award, most likely to be flipped off while taking a picture award, the best, my God, this is how you develop software look award. It's beautiful. Best use of triple in a sentence award. So everybody do the Plone walk at Plone Symposium East in 2009. And so we come to the latter days. And we're still going strong. Sprints are still going strong. Conferences are still going strong. Training. Who needs books, really, when we have such wonderful training, written material? The foundation is still working hard. And Volto really is kind of experiencing the same growth, the same explosive growth, in my opinion, that Plone had in its early days. So let's focus on that. Now, there are some watershed divide moments. And if you walk along the red line here in the middle where it says continental divide and it's raining, basically any raindrop that falls to your right, if you're walking north, is going to eventually flow down into the Gulf of Mexico or into the Atlantic. And every drop that falls on your left is going to flow into the Pacific Ocean. And that's the metaphor for a few moments that stood out for me as I went through this material. This is one that to me is really representative of what the character of this community is. This is the end point of a long process, which started with the formation of the Plone Foundation, or really probably it was actually born in the heads of Alex and Alan when they decided early on that they wanted to hand this over to the community. But in 2007, this actually happened when the company known as Plone Solution basically gave up this name and took on the name Yarn because they wanted to create a level playing field for everybody else. I think this was very influential on everybody, every member of the community, knowing this is what we are about. In 2007, the trademark was finally taken over by Plone, the foundation. And this is the other watershed moment where I remember this day. It was early, like it was in 2011, and it was in my early days, and I didn't know many people. I hadn't even ever heard of Dona Lestremea, but I saw this outpouring of just grief and love, and it made me realize what this community is made of. And I just want to say to everybody here, no matter who you are, some people may not be very widely known, but no matter who you are, somebody here sincerely loves you and wants nothing but the best for you. And this is true. So please write your watershed moment in, if there are any that for you define the Plone community in your years. And here are some conclusions. I'll just jump to the last one. In the early days, Plone.org was upgraded as part of the release of every Plone version. And I think we should go back to this. It would be difficult, but I think it's an important challenge. More wider conclusions. We cannot compare ourselves to ourselves in the past. We are in a different time now. We have to look look ahead, keep what works, sprints, conferences, the foundation, support the people, companies, and clients we have. Do not make, Philip the other day said, every line of code that is not written is a good line of code. And I think we should expand it to every code that we do not force our clients or our our consultants or our Plone companies to write is a good line. And that means we do not break compatibility, backward compatibility. Do not make more work for people than necessary. And invest in the greatest promise, which at this time I think is Volta. Thank you. And I have one last poll. All right. And I will jump into Jitsi.